All right, so it's a little after 2 o'clock here, so let's go ahead and get started with our webinar. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar today on document accessibility as a requirement, choosing between outsourced remediation or software tools. So this webinar is going to be part of a series of 16 webinars that we're having over the next few months. In this current climate that we're all working from home or we're working remotely in response to the COVID-19 crisis, so we're going to be covering topics of interest but on a general level and on a technical level. So take a look at our website and sign up for sign up for all of the webinars that you find of interest. So this is going to be fairly high level today. We're going to talk about the discussion from maybe a 5,000-foot level. It won't drill too deeply into specific topics. And then some of the webinars that are upcoming are going to dig deep into both the technical aspects of document accessibility, in how to choose between tools that meet the standards, talking about RFP generation, and a number of other things in regard to providing document accessibility tools. So with that, let's get started. So I'm David Herr. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Common Look, and I have Sandeep Shamara, sorry, from here, one of our document accessibility consultants here at Common Look. And Chad Zaire will not be able to make it today, so it'll just be Sandeep and myself doing the conference, the webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sandeep Sharma, Federal Government Document Accessibility Consultant. So Common Look's been around for over 20 years. We are recognized as the industry leaders when it comes to document accessibility. And with all of our customers, we like to always discuss the best practices regarding mitigating any risk on your end, our remediation process, and our capacity, which is now at over 1 million pages annually, and the guaranteed compliance for any remediation work Common Look does for you. So on our next slide, I want to note that with offices here in the United States, Canada, and Australia, Common Look has served thousands of clients in many industries. We work with about 70% of the federal government, the VA, CDC, FDA, just to name a few, numerous corporations. In higher education, we have prestigious institutions like Yale who are utilizing our remediation services. And in healthcare, we have Blue Cross Blue Shield. In the financial sector, we're working with companies like Bank of America. Our solutions and services are really tailored to our clients' needs, and that's why we're recognized as the industry experts in Section 508. Common Look has been a huge supporter and contributor for the ISO PDF accessibility standard. And so one of the key things that Common Look is proud to stand by is our guaranteed compliance. We're going to talk about this in more detail here in a little bit, but basically any document that Common Look remediates for you is backed with a guaranteed compliance stamp from Common Look. So this means if you go through any kind of internal audit or legal pressure, we stand by your side the whole time and will prove to any third party that the documents we've remediated for you are indeed 100% accessible. I noticed that there are some potential audio issues. Just want to make sure that people can hear me.
I can hear you fine, Sandeep.
Okay.
So far, only one person, so I'm hoping that that's the extent of it. But if it becomes a problem, I'll let you know.
All right, very good. Thank you, Susan. So moving to our next slide here. One of the big things that we like to point out specifically is that there's a rise, obviously, in ADA lawsuits and the demand for document accessibility. We've seen that rise go up about 181%. So, making your documents should be a critical focus for really everyone in 2020, especially with most of us being able to work from home. We hope that you're able to take the time to really make sure your documents are compliant. Moving to our next slide here. Over 1 billion people live with some form of disability. So that's about 1/7 of the Earth's population. 285 million are visually impaired, and 360 million people are suffering from some sort of hearing loss. So we bring these stats just to kind of bring the awareness of why this is so important. The reality is that, according to the World Health Organization, disability is a part of the human condition, and almost everyone will be temporarily or permanently impaired at some point in their life. So going into the next slide here, one thing that we like to really kind of paint a picture for is that, this is just a kind of a good idea of showing you, how this disability kind of impacts everyone and how there needs to be an equal access, right? So, we've got people that have low vision or some kind of level of colorblind, so they're using a screen reader. For the visually impaired, they have their closed captioning. For mobility people that have some issues there, they're sometimes only able to use their keyboard, speech to text, and in the cognitive area, there's, certainly the digital content layout and information organization. So, everyone has some sort of, area where we can potentially help them, and that's our goal, is to just make sure that documents online are accessible. So moving to the next slide here. The compliance laws and standards, it really helps mitigate your legal risk, and that's why we encourage that, everyone kind of help everyone in meeting the needs for all document users. What that allows you to do is it gives you a competitive advantage, it allows you to grow your customers, and you really are, mitigating your legal risk altogether. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it back to Dave.
So, what we're going to focus today on as far as web accessibility is on documents and the document side of accessibility. In most organizations that have started working on web accessibility projects obviously start with the HTML. They're working on the website and getting the website to work well with screen readers and to make, closed captioning of videos and things like that. Documents tend to be the last thing that gets looked at because it's not necessarily part of the web publishing process. It's not part of the creative teams and the marketing teams. And the PDF documents that are typically the final format of documents that are saved on websites tend to come from all different sources. So there's people all throughout your organization that might be the authors of these documents, creating documents that necessarily aren't accessible. And these documents find themselves up on the website as a form or as a legal brief or some other kind of a document that ends up on the website that if it's not in an accessible format, it's going to be a big issue for your website's overall accessibility. There's also a little bit of use of Office documents on websites, but typically it's PDF. So the challenge is in getting PDF documents accessible. And just, the accessibility regulations now demand compliance. Years ago, we would talk to organizations and they would tell us, well, we're not under the requirements of Section 508, so we don't get money from the federal government, so because of that, we don't need to make our website accessible. And in the recent few years, the ADA rules have now started to apply to websites. So now everyone is under the ADA. So it's not just from a physical access to your building or making sure your bathrooms are accessible to people with disabilities, but now it's your website as well. So this is now a requirement for all of us, not just certain organizations. So just a couple facts about document accessibility. One is that PDFs can't be made accessible. We've heard this before. And in fact, the Australian government has a law or a rule or requirement that says that PDF documents, if you put a PDF document on your website, you also need to have the same content in a second format, such as Word. Yet Word is not necessarily any more accessible than PDF when you first create it, and can have its own accessibility issues. So PDFs can be made accessible. When Adobe developed the tagging structure years ago and created that tag structure that screen readers use to read PDFs, the PDF document format now is one of the most accessible formats when it's used correctly. The other thing we hear is that, well, I don't need to make my PDFs accessible because we have we'll offer to give somebody an alternative format on our website if they ask for it. And that's also been pretty much thrown out in various lawsuits, that if you can't not have accessible content and then not give people the same accommodations as you give to everyone else. Long delays or other things to get them that accessible content is a problem. So PDFs need to be made accessible. PDFs can be made accessible. And if you're going to put this content on your website, it needs to be accessible. It's pretty much the bottom line. So, the crux of this webinar today was to talk about how do you go about figuring out what's going to be your approach. If we all agree that our documents need to be accessible, what's going to be the approach to fix it, to fix the problem? So at Common Look, we kind of look at the overall circle of all of this. It's all interrelated. And it starts with auditing and testing against standards. So let's say you have a project, you know you need to do something about the documents on your website. So you need to figure out where you sit, where you begin, where do we start? So auditing the website, using tools that we're going to talk about in a minute to go pull documents down, figure out what's wrong with them, so then we can decide which approach are we going to take. And there's really only two approaches. I can do this internally. We can build an internal team. We can acquire training and support and build a team to do the work in-house, which is a good plan. Most organizations eventually move to that part. The other alternative is you outsource it. So you find a vendor that's qualified. You figure out the terms of your project, the scale of your project, and then you send the documents out, you get the documents back. There's a final step though, and that's where you monitor and you report. Whether your internal teams are creating accessible documents or whether you're outsourcing those documents, how do we know that what we're getting back is accessible? So you have to have tools and you have to have a QA process and perhaps a monitoring tool on your website to be able to say, okay, now that we're publishing everything, it's accessible and we can prove that it's accessible by these various means. So that's kind of the overview of what we're going to talk about today. So you start on this path. Many organizations will start with outsourcing because it's the quick fix. But one of the webinars we're going to talk about in the future here is that accessibility needs to be a process and not a project. So while outsourcing is great to get a quick fix, to get a large number of documents made accessible, you're not done once you because you've created new documents. There's new content being added to your website all the time. So outsourcing is great, it gets you going, but then you need to be able to build the process that new content as it's created is hopefully made accessible at the time of creation. And then that way you're not adding to your problem and you don't have to keep outsourcing projects ongoing if you can do some of this in-house. So that's our path of using remediation to get quickly started and then building in-house capacity. So again, which way do we go? Do we outsource? Do we insource? What do we do? The reasons to do it internally, you do know what documents you're working on, you know what's coming, you know what's coming down the pike. If you have time to be able to do it, you do have to have an understanding of the standards. And when I say standards, I'm saying WCAG 2.0, 2.1, HHS, or PDF UA, depending on what your organization has selected or is mandated by the government or by your corporation to achieve. And you have to know how to use the tools that are out there. Of course, your reasons to outsource are you need it done quickly. You have a large number of documents. There's no way your internal team can handle 10,000 documents in a short period of time. And perhaps you don't have the experience or the knowledge of what's required to make the documents accessible or to assess them. So those are, again, your reasons. So when we talk about this phase one, we're really talking about you're assessing your plan. You're developing, what am I going to do? What's the size of the project? What process am I going to use to test against? And then what's the priorities? Like, for example, I may have 10 years of my budget on my website. Well, do I need to remediate, 2010 first and then do 2020? No, we probably should prioritize the documents and say the most recent years of budget need to be done first, and then we can go back to a certain point. And you need to assess, do I need those documents on my website? Do I really need to have extra content out there that perhaps isn't being used or isn't being accessed? And you can do some analytics to determine if it's still in use, if people are accessing these files. And if you can legally remove some files from your website that are 15 years old, 10 years old, you probably should do so. It's going to lessen the size of your project and allow you to achieve success quicker in making your website accessible. At the same time, if content needs to be there, it needs to be there, and keep it, just make sure it's saved as accessible, remediated, fixed. So you need to assess and plan what your scope of your project's going to be. So now we're talking about how do I check documents? How do I check the documents that are on the website? How do I check the documents that people are sending us to determine, whether we need to make them accessible or not? So the first stop that people normally will do is Adobe Acrobat. Adobe Acrobat DC or Pro specifically. It was originally the only tool to be able to edit the tag tree or create the tag tree in a PDF document. There are now other tools that can do that as well. And it does have an accessibility checker in the product. And so there's a tool there that you can go in and pull up a PDF document, see if it's tagged, tag it if it's not tagged, and then you can run this accessibility checker against the document to determine what accessibility issues it may have. The cons of Adobe Acrobat Pro are it doesn't guarantee compliance to a particular standard. It does tell you the common accessibility issues that a document might have. So it's going to tell you if there's no alt text. It's going to tell you if there's heading level issues. It's going to show you the reading order, things like that. But it's not necessarily going to say this document is checkpoint by checkpoint WCAG 2.11 AA compliant. And it also has some issues with some false positives and some false negatives. The second checker that's out there, and it's a free tool, is the PAC3 checker. So good thing about it is inexpensive. It is a free download. You can download this, and a lot of organizations will use this tool. It tests against PDF UA, and PDF UA is the ISO standard that's been created for basically setting the blueprint for accessible PDF. The WCAG standards that the W3C put out weren't written for PDFs specifically. They were written for web content, and they've been adapted for PDF because many of the criteria comes over, but there's normally not embedded video content in a PDF. You know, so there's things that have to do with web that really aren't addressed in PDF. So the ISO developed a PDF UA standard, and it's a fairly strict, it's probably one of the strictest standards from a compliance standpoint for PDF documents. So because of that, many organizations have chosen that to kind of future-proof the work that they're doing. So this tests against PDF UA. It does give you kind of a preview of how the document would work in a screen reader. The reports that come out of the tool are not accessible. So if that's an issue, if you're sending the reports out to your accessibility team and they need to be in accessible format, they're not going to be accessible. It has some issues with artifacts and some other things. But it's a good free tool. It's a good resource. Nothing wrong with using PAC3. And then we have Common Look Validator. So we created a tool that's also free. And the reason we created Common Look Validator was from the multiple things we were hearing from our clients about, you know, I need to test a WCAG. I need to test to section 508. I need to check against other checkpoints. And there wasn't a tool that did all of the standards. And we have a tool called Common Look PDF, which does all that testing, but it also does the remediation side. So we took the remediation reporting side of our Common Look PDF tool, and we made that reporting component a free tool that anyone can go to our website and download. So it will provide you with, you know, checkpoint by checkpoint status reports of your PDF documents to whatever standard your organization has chosen. We even do standards such as HHS, which has its own variation of WCAG that they've used for their reporting. So it shows you the tag content, it shows you the untagged content, it generates that report, shows you the metadata. So basically it's going to show you all the aspects of a PDF document that you need to either fix in your document or that your document's fully accessible. It passes checkpoint by checkpoint, which is great. So that's Common Look Validator. So these are three tools that you can use to test content and determine whether they're accessible or not, or determine how much work you're going to have to do to move forward. So now your second phase, so the first phase is to assess and figure out your issues. Your second phase is going to be now to fix the errors. You've now collected a batch of documents. Let's say it's 5,000 documents and it's 20,000 pages of content. So it's a large project. So now you're going to be looking at, you know, how do we do the testing? How do we do the remediation work? Is it internal? Is it external? Or do we outsource it in a hybrid approach where some of the documents, let's say fillable forms, because they're more difficult, are sent to an outsourced organization, and you do the easier documents, the simpler text documents that can be remediated in-house. So you're going to have to then acquire a vendor or tools or get training, and then you're going to do the PDF remediation. So again, talking about internal versus external, you know, internal is going to require either Adobe Acrobat or Common Look PDF or another tool of some type. you're going to be looking at your staff and your training and the time available to be able to handle that internal project. Outsourcing from the standpoint of it being easier and simpler because you can just turn a project over to an organization. We will be having a webinar later this month on RFPs. So when you are doing outsourcing, you do want to make sure that you write into your RFP some strict guidelines so that you know that bid A or bid B or bid C are all against those guidelines and guaranteeing they're going to provide you with what you're paying for, because that's so critical. And if you are going to outsource your project, you need to know you're getting documents that are guaranteed, you're getting documents that meet the standard that you're paying for, and of course are priced cost competitive with the market. Of course, outsourcing also has the issue that's probably going to cost more than doing it internally from some regards, especially if it's done, you need files done quickly under a time constraint. So what are you going to use to do your remediation? So as I mentioned earlier, Adobe Acrobat does show you the tags. It does let you add the tags to a document that's untagged. It does generate a report, and then you can actually go in and, of course, fix the document using Adobe Acrobat Professional or DC. Many people use Adobe Acrobat, or they start out using Adobe Acrobat as their remediation tool. And there's lots of content on the web and lots of people doing training on how to use Acrobat as that remediation tool. Almost anyone that's familiar with doing this is going to tell you that it's a difficult process. It's a time-consuming process. Complex tables and complex content can take you a long time to do. And then you're going to need some kind of a tool to do your testing. You can run the Acrobat report. That'll get you so far. And then you're probably going to want to use one of those free tools to be able to test the content further and ensure you're meeting the standards. So Common Look has our tool called Common Look PDF that's in its 5th generation and has been around for well over 10 years. It's a much more advanced tool that's actually a plug-in to Adobe Acrobat. So you could open up a PDF that's untagged. You can tag it in Adobe Acrobat, and then in Common Look PDF, you would do the remediation. It's really designed to create documents that meet the particular standards that your organization is required to do. So Section 508, HHS, WCAG, both 2.0 and 2.1, PDF UA. It does generate that detailed report that we talked about that's proved you went through the file checkpoint by checkpoint of the standard and that you have passed or failed or made the changes necessary to meet the accessibility rules. It's a lot of powerful components that allow the remediation process to be a lot faster, a lot quicker, and a lot more accurate. The cons are, of course, it does have a cost, and it will probably require some training to get the most out of the tool. So those are really the only 2 tools that are out in the market as remediation tools. There's some other products that are out there that do some automation and do some other things and do some auto tagging, but you're typically still going back into some other tool to do your final cleanup and to do your compliance testing. So I'm left those out of this conversation for right now. So your 3rd phase of this 5-phase, project of document remediation is now around being proactive. You've created content while this project was going on and while you were doing either remediation or you had outsourced a bunch of documents. New documents are still being created. Content is still being pushed from authors, and it's going up to the web developers who are posting it up on the website. So you have to start developing a program internally within your organization to be able to start making accessible content going forward. Those documents that are up on the website have been there for years, and they've been in an inaccessible format for years. But now it's time to start being proactive within your organization. So how do you do that? What do you do? It involves training. It involves creating a program within your organization. It involves an executive buy-in that people are going to, within your organization, demand that documents are accessible and have some kind of a process. Those testing tools we talked about earlier, that if somebody sends something to the web developers or to be published, if it's not accessible, it's kicked back to the authors to have it made into an accessible format. It is a lot cheaper to do your accessibility work during the author process than it is to go back after the fact, after content's been created, and have to go back and fix it. And that's just a proven fact. So the fourth phase is now to expand and train your organization, so expand the program. So what we've seen, and we're going to be talking in some other webinars in the future here about some specific organizations that have taken on this process to develop a full-blown accessibility program within their organization, where they have developed teams, they've developed QA teams, they've started training programs. They've really built, a model for how do we stop creating inaccessible content going forward, and how do we make this well known to everyone within our organization that this is important, that this is a legal requirement, that this is the right thing to do for everyone involved, and that this is something that your organization takes seriously, and you're going to make it now part of how you do business. So the last phase of this now, so you've done your assessment, you've done your remediation, you've done your internal training and processes, and you've done more further training to push out and develop a team. And now you need to say, okay, we've now published the content up to the website, so how do we monitor it? How do we ensure that our website is staying in compliance, that the new content, what's been remediated, is been QA'd and it passes the accessibility standards, and that new content being created going forward is being published as accessible, and that we know as an organization we're in good shape. In California, they have that AB 434 requirements where their websites, each CIO has to put on their website that their content is being certified as being accessible. And each CIO writes a letter and signs off on the website saying, yes, our website's accessible. So, how do you prove that? How do you ensure that your website's accessible, short of, doing spot checks? So many companies have tools to scan their website, to test the HTML, to test the HTML content to see if it's accessible. And those tools don't catch everything, but they'll catch the glaring mistakes. They catch the common things like there's no alt text for an image and things like that. On the PDF side, we do have a tool called Common Look Clarity that will scan a website, find all the PDFs, and then list compliance to whatever standard you choose of the documents, list them out, and then show what any issues are that they have so you can go back and fix anything that's not in compliance. If you've done the remediation and you've tested the documents, the Clarity tool will show them as passed. And we work with a company called Moncito that's a partner of ours that uses their web HTML testing and then our Common Look Clarity component built into the tool. So you can basically use one tool to test all of your website. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sandeep.
All right, thank you, Dave. So now we're going to discuss some tips for document accessibility success. So on our next slide, and as we mentioned earlier, we like to equip our customers with all the best practices moving forward, regardless of what stage they may be in with their accessible document workflow. So on this next slide here, as Dave mentioned earlier, a quote that we often like to share is that our accessibility is not a project that you have to fix, but rather it's a program that you have to create, right? So first off, it's incredibly important to maintain an inventory of all of your documents that need to be accessible and really prioritize which documents need to be made accessible immediately. This is really based on the documents that have the highest impact on your customers and perhaps other stakeholders. Next, for any future documents that you know need to be made accessible, design and create those documents with accessibility in mind. This is really going to minimize the cost involved for any future remediation work that you need. So when choosing a remediation partner, it's important to work on your that's working on your documents. Make sure that that company has a proven remediation process in place and that they offer you a guarantee on their results. And last but not least, whether Common Look remediates your documents for you, you're remediating those documents yourself, or really whoever is doing it for you, always make sure to continually monitor your documents to ensure that they're adhering to the accessibility standards and guidelines. And this is simply because the rules and regulations revolving around accessibility are constantly evolving. So just be sure to check your documents at every key milestone. So with that in mind, on this next slide, we're going to discuss some organizational consideration when working on your document accessibility workflow. So first and foremost, it's crucial to get your executive support from your higher ups in the management. If you can get their buy-in early enough, then it makes everything that much easier for you being proactive with your accessibility, your documents, and making them accessible. Having a cross-functional team that really, you know, everybody is working on considering that these documents we're working on has to be made accessible really just allows you to be more proactive. When you have the capacity on your end to do the work, that's certainly great, but we also recommend investing in more staff and tools to really put your belt for accessibility in the best place possible for, you know, being accessible with your documents. And as we keep reiterating, last but not least, if you're outsourcing your work to a remediation partner, make sure that they can handle your workflow, handle the complexity of your documents, and also, again, have the trusted name in remediation to really back you up with your work. So on this next slide, what we're going to really discuss is what I brought up earlier, which is, you know, that guaranteed compliance that Common Look provides to all of our customers. So as you can note here on the right, there is a compliance report that's generated, and that happens whether you have Common Look do the remediation for you or whether you're using our software and doing the work for yourself. But specifically, when Common Look does the remediation work for you, what this means is that if you go through any kind of internal audit, you go through any kind of lawsuit or any kind of legal matter, we will actually generate this report for you, which comes with every remediation project we do, supporting everything that we did and how we made your documents accessible. So what this means for you, no false positives, everything is 100% accurate. Now, moving on to the next slide, you know, we like to pitch something here at Common Look called our hybrid approach, and that is simply for especially our newer customers. When you're using our software initially, you know, the learning curve varies for everybody and it takes some time to get acclimated. So while you're doing that, we encourage you to use the remediation process. But here is a great tool belt for accessibility, and these are just some of the solutions that Dave has also discussed earlier. But just kind of quickly going through them again, our PDF validator tool is a completely free tool, which we more than encourage anyone and everyone to download. You simply go to commonlook.com, fill out a quick form, and now you have this free tool which allows you to upload your document and check and see where it stands in terms of compliance, where it's failing, or if it is indeed 100% accessible. Moving to the left here, when we look at our Clarity solution, as Dave brought up earlier, this is a more ruggedized version of our validator tool, and it allows you to scan through numerous different files at once, whether that's on your domain, on your website, or it's, you know, a SharePoint file, or it's something local even on your computer. The best way I like to paint the picture of Clarity is that it's like a virus scan on your computer. It's going to go through all of your documents and tell you exactly where they stand in terms of compliance. Moving along to our Office solution. This is a fantastic solution that we always recommend, especially if you have a team of authors that's making internal documents that eventually are going to be public-facing, or really any of your documents that you know need to be made accessible. The Office solution is something that is a very user-friendly tool. So even if you don't have a background in accessibility, our Common Look Office will allow you to work on any documents in Word and PowerPoint, and it's a very user-friendly wizard guide that's prompting you through the entire process so that before that document becomes a PDF, it's 100% accessible. And of course then, last but not least, we've got our industry-leading PDF tool, which is for any historical documents you have or any PDFs you're working on. This tool is a plugin into Adobe Acrobat and will allow you to make your documents accessible. Most of our customers have found that it's a very speedy process in comparison to a lot of other solutions they may have used in the past. And more importantly, we've got a back button in our PDF validator tool. So if you ever make a mistake, you don't have to worry about starting all over with your document. You can simply push the back button all the way to when you even first started working on that document. Now, going to the next slide here. Well, actually, that concludes everything. So at this point, we're going to leave it open to any questions and answers that you guys may have.
And I see there was a couple questions here. So the first question was, is there any chance of a Mac OS compatible version of your software? Our designers don't have Windows computers in their department. So the answer to that is something that we have heard for many years from various clients, and you know, it's really a question of volume. So the more we're hearing it, you know, the more likely chance we're going to be able to take a more serious look at this in the future. Unfortunately, it would be a complete rewrite of the tool because it's based on the Windows version of Adobe Acrobat. There's probably a more likely chance that we would do a standalone version if we went down the Mac route. So it is something we're looking at. It's not something that we have available in the near future. So that's all I can promise. But we'll be happy to take that question offline and talk more about, you know, quantities and things like that to try to figure out when we could put that on our roadmap. So the second question I have here is, I'm about to kick off a PDF audit for a large state agency. Many documents have come from vendors and include blueprints, maps, and other images. Any advice for getting these highly technical program teams on board? Boy, that's a good one. We've seen with large projects such as this, the biggest issue is subject matter experts for like alt text. You know, let's say that's construction drawings. So, you know, you'll have the text, which is easy throughout the document to be able to tag that correctly. But then there's an engineering drawing, and that engineering drawing needs to have, you know, it's not something that just somebody, you know, who's doing just the accessibility work can write proper alt text for something like that. It needs an engineer, or it needs somebody that can describe that drawing. I have seen some agencies where, because the technical, the author of the document is no longer there and it's an older document, they'll put in a general description of one of those technical drawings, and then they'll list an email address that can be reached in the engineering department to ask questions on the particular drawing if somebody needs additional information on it. That doesn't technically meet the criteria for accessibility, but it may be the best option for something that's very complex and very large, and is not, you're not going to be able to get the experts right now to be able to do that. But yes, you want to think about that when you're doing a large project like this, is who are going to be the subject matter experts to develop the alt text. It's a problem, and you need to have the right people to do that. And so typically when we're faced with this, we'll go back and work with the organization that we're working with to say, do you guys have the engineering people on staff? There's been times when we've had to go out and get an expert for particular content, because we're not experts in, say, engineering or chemistry or, you know, some technical criteria like that. But it should definitely be, and this goes back to that RFP. If you're putting out an RFP or an audit, you're going to want to figure out who gets that information. The last question I have right now is, if we know how many total documents we have, is there any way to get a rough estimate on how many full-time remediators are needed? You probably can. It's going to depend on a number of different things. So if you know how many total documents you have, then you should have a page count. And the typical page count for doing remediation, it's going to be based on the complexity of the content. So again, if these documents are long technical documents with lots of alt text requirements and lots of tables and lots of you know, multi-columns and things like that, you know, the amount of time it's going to take per page is going to, it's something you could determine. So you could determine how many people you're going to need. The other part of that question is, what's your time frame? Do you need to get them done in the next 3 months, or do you have time to get these documents done? And then the final criteria for that rough estimate is, what tools are you using? If you're going to use Adobe Acrobat, it's going to take you a longer period of time than it's going to do using a tool like Common Look PDF. And we'd be happy to show you demonstrations on where the time savings are in that regard. So yes, it can be estimated. If you gave us a page count, it's something we could give you some estimates as far as time, but it's going to depend on those complexities and a few other things. So are there any other questions? We got 3 questions. So with that, we're going to about just a couple more minutes, but if nobody has any other questions, we will be sending out an email link to the captioned version of this video recording of the webinar. We do have a whole bunch of other webinars coming soon that are going to be drilling much deeper into, as I said, many specific projects, RFPs, dealing with AB 434 in California, a whole technical series of 10 webinars that are going to go into all the details of, you know, everything from what's required to get started with a document, to get the document ready to go, what's required in an accessible document, and then how to fix everything piece by piece throughout the document. So we will be having that technical series, and then in addition to that, we have a general series that hopefully is going to answer a lot of questions that people have, you know, on these projects and developing, the processes to make your accessibility program successful.
Hey, Dave, it looks like we have another question that came in from Isabella in the chat. Why, after importing a document into Adobe Acrobat Pro, I should write alt text again, even if I have them in the document? Is it a common problem?
It is a common problem. I've seen that before. You put it in the document, and then when you bring it over to Acrobat, Acrobat's tagging isn't seeing it, so it's deleting it, and you got to enter it in again. All I can say is it's a common problem with Acrobat. I mean, it's something you can check with Adobe on, but it's a known problem. Were there any other questions? All right, well, very good. And what I'll do for that question, Isabella, is I'll get somebody to reach out to you and talk a little more about that problem and maybe.
Well, it looks like we have one more question that came in. Are there any training resources? So I'll be happy to answer that one. We do have some training that has all actually been shifted to webinar training online. So for our Common Look PDF solution, there are two different training courses. One is a PDF Basic and one is a PDF Advanced. That is with a live trainer in a webinar format. If you have any questions about that, we can certainly send you some more information. For Common Look Office solution, we also have a training. It's a webinar as well. There is not a live trainer, but it is an interactive training. So as Dave mentioned earlier, we certainly want to equip you with all the tools necessary, and our training is something that we highly recommend to everyone, regardless of where your skill set may be with remediation, just to make sure that you have all the intricacies understood with our solutions, but also understand the best practices in using them as well.
We've also taken our training materials and a lot of other content, and we have a knowledge base for all of our PDF accessibility knowledge that's available to any of our customers. And there's additional information on our website that anybody can access. So we'll be sending out the caption video recording. Feel free to check out our website and look at the Spring 2020 webinar series. And if there's something of interest, please sign up. We would greatly appreciate it. Anybody has any questions, or if there's content you want to see in future webinars that we're not addressing, please reach out to sales@commonlook.com. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. So with that, I will return everybody to the rest of your day. Thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to talking to you in the near future. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.